Luftwaffe sighed their bombers were best, until the Mosquito flew high and fast over Berlin. Berlin, January 30th, 1943. 11:00 a.m. Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, stands before the microphone at the Air Ministry. Outside, thousands have gathered. Across Germany, millions wait by their radios. Today marks 10 years since the Nazi seizure of power, and Göring is about to deliver a speech celebrating German air supremacy. The message he's prepared is simple, confident, triumphant. German engineering rules the skies. No enemy can touch us. But 400 miles away, 3 British aircraft are crossing into German airspace at 25,000 feet, headed straight for Berlin. And they're about to deliver a very different message. One the Reich Marshal isn't expecting. For 2 years, German High Command had been dismissing intelligence reports about a new British bomber. They called it the Mosquito, a twin-engine aircraft made of plywood. The Luftwaffe's technical officers laughed when they read the reports. Wood? Against German steel? Against the most advanced air force in the world? It wasn't just skepticism. It was certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from ideology, not analysis. Nazi Germany had built its entire war doctrine on technological supremacy. Metal construction, heavy armor, overwhelming firepower. This was the German way, the only way. At the core of their worldview was a hierarchy as rigid as their racial doctrine. German steel and aluminum at the apex, precision engineering, industrial might. Below that, anything improvised, lightweight, or, worst of all, wooden. Those were the tools of inferior nations, desperate nations, defeated nations. A wooden bomber didn't just violate their engineering standards, it insulted their entire belief system. So when Luftwaffe radar detected those 3 Mosquitoes approaching Berlin that morning, German commanders weren't worried. They scrambled interceptors. F-190s climbed hard from Tempelhof and Staaken airfields. The fighters would handle it. They always did. What happened next would shatter more than windows. At 11:07 a.m., 7 minutes into Göring's speech, the first bomb hit. Broadcasting house, 200 meters from where the Reich Marshal was speaking. The microphone went dead. Air raid sirens wailed across the capital. Crowds scattered. Göring's celebration of invincibility became a moment of national humiliation. And the Mosquitoes? Gone. Vanished into cloud cover over the Baltic before German fighters even reached intercept altitude. By the end of the war, that wooden toy had flown over 39,000 combat missions. Luftwaffe interceptors managed to shoot down fewer than 100. The Mosquito's loss rate? Under 1%, the lowest of any Allied bomber in the entire war. Meanwhile, Germany lost over 4,000 aircraft trying to defend against a plane their engineers had dismissed as impossible. This is a story that's been overshadowed by the legends. The Spitfires, the B-17s, the aircraft that fill documentaries and dominate history books. But it's one of the most powerful lessons in military history about what happens when arrogance meets innovation. If you want to see more forgotten World War II stories like this, stories about ingenuity defeating ideology, about underdogs outsmarting empires, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's make sure these stories don't stay buried in the archives. Because this is how technological arrogance met creative desperation and lost. This is how German engineers who mocked a wooden aircraft watched it bomb their capital in broad daylight. This is how a plane built from scarcity, powered by speed instead of armor, became the most versatile aircraft of the war. This is the story of the de Havilland Mosquito, and it starts with understanding exactly what the Nazis believed about engineering, power, and who deserved to dominate the skies. To understand how a plywood aircraft humiliated the Luftwaffe, You first need to understand what Nazi Germany believed about technology and war. The Third Reich wasn't just fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting what they saw as a civilizational war, a struggle to prove that German science, German engineering, and German will were superior to anything the world had ever seen. This wasn't subtle. It wasn't just propaganda. It was official military doctrine, taught in every academy, embedded in every technical manual, believed by every engineer who designed their war machines. Nazi ideology positioned the Luftwaffe as the steel fist of German supremacy. Their bombers, Heinkels, Junkers, Dorniers, were portrayed as invincible, precision-built, unstoppable, the aircraft of the master race, and at the core of their engineering philosophy was a hierarchy of materials and methods. German steel and aluminum construction at the top, heavy armor plating, overwhelming firepower, brute industrial might. This was modern warfare. This was the future. Below that, anything deemed improvised or unconventional, anything lightweight, anything non-metallic, and at the very bottom of this technological pyramid, wooden aircraft. Wood belonged to the last war. Biplanes and canvas, obsolete relics from an era when men fought with primitive machines. To suggest in 1940 that a frontline bomber be built from plywood would be like suggesting cavalry charge a panzer division. It wasn't just impractical. It was offensive to the laws of modern warfare. German technical manuals were explicit. Wooden structures couldn't handle stress. They couldn't carry heavy payloads. They splintered under gunfire. They were slower, weaker, tactically irrelevant. So when Luftwaffe intelligence officers first received reports in 1941 about a British wooden bomber project, they filed them as misinformation. British propaganda designed to mask their real developments. No serious air force, they reasoned, would waste resources on such a design. The reports were real. The British were building a wooden bomber, and it was about to rewrite the rules of aerial warfare. To understand how a wooden aircraft became Nazi Germany's nightmare, you first need to understand what the Third Reich believed about technology, engineering, and destiny. The Nazi war machine in 1940 wasn't just fighting for territory. They were fighting what they saw as a civilizational war, a struggle to prove that German science, German engineering, and German will were superior to anything the world had ever seen. This wasn't subtle. It was official state doctrine. Every German schoolchild learned it. Every factory worker built it. Every soldier carried it into battle. German engineering is unmatched. German steel is unbreakable. German science will decide the future. The Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring's pride, embodied this ideology more than any other branch of the Wehrmacht. Propaganda posters showed sleek Heinkel He-111s and Junkers Ju-88s dominating European skies. Göring himself, draped in medals, was presented as the architect of aerial invincibility. Newsreels boasted of 1,000-bomber raids, of Warsaw and Rotterdam reduced to rubble, of the Blitz that was supposed to break Britain's will. At the core of Nazi engineering philosophy was a hierarchy as rigid as their racial doctrine. At the top, advanced metallurgy, precision-built aluminum airframes, powerful engines, heavy armor plating. Strength through mass, dominance through firepower. This was modern warfare, industrial, overwhelming, unstoppable. Below that, anything improvised, lightweight, or non-metallic. These were the tools of inferior nations, desperate nations, defeated nations. And at the very bottom of the technological pyramid, wooden aircraft. Wood belonged in the last war. Biplanes and canvas. Obsolete relics from a bygone era when men fought with primitive machines. To German engineers in 1940, suggesting a frontline bomber be built from plywood would be like suggesting cavalry charge a panzer division. It wasn't just impractical. It was insulting to the laws of modern warfare. German technical manuals were explicit. Wooden structures couldn't handle stress. They couldn't carry heavy payloads. They splintered under gunfire. They were slower, weaker, and tactically irrelevant. When Luftwaffe intelligence officers first received reports in 1941 of a British wooden bomber project, they filed them as misinformation. Propaganda designed to mask Britain's real developments. No serious air force, they reasoned, would waste resources on such a design. And they weren't entirely wrong to be skeptical, because across the Channel, Britain was desperate. The Blitz had killed over 40,000 civilians. Cities smoldered. Factories struggled to keep pace with losses. And most critically, aluminum was running out. Every Spitfire, every Hurricane, every bomber required tons of lightweight metal that Britain simply didn't have enough of. Steel was needed for ships and tanks, aluminum for fighters, copper for electronics. Britain's aircraft production was a bottleneck choking the war effort. Into this crisis stepped Geoffrey de Havilland, a 58-year-old aircraft designer with a reputation for unorthodox ideas. His proposal was radical, almost absurd. Build a bomber out of wood. Not just any wood. Balsa and birch plywood, laminated in layers, shaped into a streamlined fuselage. No defensive guns, they add weight. No armor plating, it slows you down. Just speed. Pure, uncompromising speed. Make it so fast, de Havilland argued, that it doesn't need protection. Make it so light that it can fly higher and farther than anything the Germans can field. Use materials Britain has in abundance. Timber from furniture makers, craftsmen from boat builders. The Air Ministry was skeptical. Military traditionalists called it a wooden coffin. Even some British engineers dismissed it as desperation masquerading as innovation. But Winston Churchill saw something else. He saw a way to turn scarcity into strength. To fight German industrial might not with more steel, but with imagination. In December 1940, Churchill approved full production of the de Havilland Mosquito. The Germans were building monuments to power. Britain was building a ghost, and neither side yet understood that the entire ideology of aerial warfare was about to be rewritten, not by the nation with the most steel, but by the one willing to think beyond it. November 1940, Salisbury Hall, Hertfordshire. In a requisitioned country estate, hidden behind trees and camouflage netting, Geoffrey de Havilland's team began building what most of the British aviation establishment considered a fool's errand, a wooden bomber, against the Luftwaffe. The mockery wasn't just from the Germans, it came from within Britain's own air ministry. "You're asking us to send men into combat in a furniture crate," one procurement officer said during early reviews. Senior RAF commanders questioned whether plywood could even survive the stress of high-altitude flight. Engineers from rival firms called it de Havilland's hobby horse, a vanity project that would waste precious resources while producing nothing combat-worthy. Even test pilots raised eyebrows. Wood couldn't take battle damage. It couldn't mount the defensive gun turrets every other bomber carried. It would be shredded by German fighters the moment it entered hostile airspace. But de Havilland had done the mathematics, and the mathematics were beautiful. Strip away the gun turrets, save 2,000 pounds. Remove the armor plating, save another 1,500 pounds. Use laminated plywood instead of aluminum, lighter, more aerodynamic, and crucially, available. Mount 2 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, the same power plants that made Spitfires legendary, on a frame that weighed half what a metal bomber weighed. The equation was simple. Less weight plus more power equals speed. Speed equals survival. The work proceeded in secret, not because it was classified, but because de Havilland knew that if the project became too visible, the skeptics would kill it before it could prove itself. Furniture craftsmen joined aircraft engineers. Boat builders who understood laminated wood construction worked alongside aeronautical designers. The fuselage was assembled in two halves, molded plywood shells bonded together, creating a structure that was simultaneously lightweight and incredibly strong. No rivets, no seams, just smooth, continuous curves shaped in molds, then joined with redux adhesive, a new bonding technique that made the wood as strong as welded metal. By September 1941, the prototype was ready. It sat on the runway at Hatfield Aerodrome looking almost delicate. Sleek yellow paint, twin engines, no gun turrets breaking up its silhouette. To observers gathered that day, it looked fast just sitting still, but that might have been wishful thinking. Jeffrey de Havilland Jr., the designer's son, and the company's chief test pilot, climbed into the cockpit. November 25, 1941, 10:15 a.m. The Merlins roared to life. The Mosquito accelerated down the runway, lifted smoothly, and climbed. What happened next shocked everyone watching. The Mosquito didn't just fly, it soared. De Havilland Jr. radioed back mid-flight. "Handling is superb. She's faster than anything I've flown." When the speed trials came back, engineers checked the numbers twice. They thought the instruments were wrong. Maximum speed, 392 miles per hour. That was faster than the Spitfire Mach-4, Britain's frontline fighter. Faster than Germany's Messerschmitt Bf-109E. Faster than any operational bomber in the world by over 100 miles per hour. And it wasn't just speed. The Mosquito could reach altitudes where German interceptors struggled to operate. It had a range of 1,500 miles, deep into occupied Europe and back without refueling. It handled like a fighter, but could carry a 4,000-pound bomb load. The skeptics went silent. Within weeks, Churchill himself reviewed the flight test data. His response was immediate and unequivocal. Full production, immediately. He saw what the Luftwaffe couldn't yet imagine. The plane the enemy never expected, built from the materials they'd dismissed, designed around principles they'd rejected, capable of performance they'd deemed impossible. By early 1942, Mosquitoes began rolling out of factories and workshops across Britain. Furniture companies that once built cabinets now built bombers. The wooden wonder was becoming real, and soon it would become legendary. Because speed on a test range is one thing. Speed over Berlin, in broad daylight, with the entire Luftwaffe hunting you, is something else entirely. The Mosquito was about to get its chance to prove that German engineering doctrine wasn't just wrong. It was fatally wrong. September 25, 1942, 9:47 a.m. Norwegian airspace. Squadron leader George Parry pushes the Mosquito's throttles forward. Below him, Oslo materializes through a broken cloud. His navigator calls out landmarks. Gestapo headquarters. Target confirmed. No fighter escort. No defensive gunners. Just two men, two Merlin engines, and 2,000 pounds of bombs screaming toward occupied Norway at 380 miles per hour. German radar stations along the coast have been tracking them since they crossed the North Sea. Luftwaffe controllers scramble Messerschmitt Bf-109s from Fornebu airfield. Four fighters climb hard, vectored toward the incoming threat. By the time they reach intercept altitude, the Mosquito is already over the target. Parry drops his payload, direct hit, then banks hard and dives for the coast. The Messerschmitts give chase. Pilots throttling to maximum power, climbing to engage. They never get close. The Mosquito pulls away like it's standing still. Within minutes, it's gone. A speck disappearing into cloud cover over the North Sea, leaving four German pilots staring at empty sky. At Luftwaffe headquarters in Oslo, the operations officer stares at the plot table in disbelief. How fast was it? The radar operator rechecks his instruments. Over 600 kilometers per hour, sir. Our fighters couldn't match it. What type of aircraft? Unknown, sir. 2 engines, no gun turrets visible. Wooden construction, possibly. The word hangs in the air like a bad joke. Wooden? 3 weeks later, October 21st, 1942, Cologne. This time, it's not a single Mosquito, it's 4, flying in loose formation at 28,000 feet, higher than most German fighters can operate effectively. Flak batteries open up, black bursts dotting the sky. But the Mosquitoes are too high, too fast. They drop their bombs on the Eiffeltor railway yards and turn for home. German controllers scramble Focke-Wulf FW-190s, the Luftwaffe's newest, fastest interceptor. 8 fighters claw for altitude, pilots pushing their engines to the red line. From his cockpit, Flight Lieutenant Gordon Slade watches them climbing below. "Bandits at 5 o'clock low," his navigator reports. Slade doesn't even throttle up. He maintains cruise speed, 370 miles per hour, and the FW-190s, maxed out at 350, fall behind. One German pilot gets close enough to line up a shot. He squeezes the trigger. His cannon shells arc uselessly through the air, falling short by 200 yards. The Mosquito pulls away effortlessly, untouched. At Luftwaffe Fighter Command in Berlin, General Adolf Galland receives the mission reports with mounting fury. They hit Oslo, they hit Cologne, and we didn't down a single aircraft? His operations staff shuffles uncomfortably. "Our interceptors are too slow, Herr General. By the time we reach altitude, the enemy is already outbound. Our radar gives us warning, but—" "Then what good is the warning?" Galland slams the report on the table. "We're chasing ghosts." One of his intelligence officers clears his throat. "Sir, we believe it's the British Mosquito, the wooden bomber." Galland's expression darkens. "The one we said couldn't work?" "Yes, sir. And now it's flying over the Reich untouchable?" Silence. December 1942. The Mosquito missions intensify. Photographic reconnaissance over Hamburg. No losses. Precision strike on the Philips radio factory in Eindhoven. No losses. Shipping raids along the Norwegian coast. No losses. Each mission follows the same pattern. German radar detects them. Fighters scramble. The Mosquitoes complete their mission and vanish before interceptors can engage. Luftwaffe Piloten beginnen mit dem Holzgeist, the wood ghost. But frustration is turning to something worse: dread. Because if the British can build an aircraft that makes German air defenses irrelevant, what else have they built that German doctrine says is impossible? In the operations room at RAF Marham, Mosquito crews debrief with quiet confidence. "Any contact with enemy fighters?" "Spotted 3 FW-190s over the target. They tried to climb on us. And we left them behind." The intelligence officer makes a note. "Mission successful. 0 losses. Enemy unable to engage." Outside, ground crews prep the next Mosquito for the next mission. The wooden wonder is no longer experimental. It's operational. It's untouchable. And it's about to fly somewhere the Luftwaffe swore no enemy bomber would ever reach. Berlin, January 30th, 1943, Berlin. 11 o'clock a.m. Hermann Göring stands before the microphone at the Air Ministry, medals gleaming across his chest. Outside, thousands gather to hear him speak. Across Germany, millions more wait by their radios. Today marks 10 years since the Nazi seizure of power. Göring's speech has been planned for weeks, a celebration of Luftwaffe supremacy, a reminder to the German people that their skies are protected, that Allied bombers dare not approach the capital in daylight. His speech sits on the podium. The opening lines practically write themselves. "In these 10 years, we have built an air force that dominates European skies." 400 miles away, 3 de Havilland Mosquitoes cross into German airspace at 25,000 feet. No fighter escort, no bomber stream, just 6 men in wooden aircraft, flying straight toward the most heavily defended city in Europe. German radar picks them up over the North Sea. Controllers alert Berlin's air defenses. Fighters scramble from Tempelhof and Staaken airfields. FW-190s clawing for altitude, racing to intercept. 11:05 a.m. Göring begins speaking. The Luftwaffe has proven itself the guardian of the Reich. Our technology, our courage, The Mosquitoes are over Berlin's outskirts now. Flak batteries open up. Black bursts of 88mm shells detonating around them. The lead pilot, squadron leader DFW Darling, holds formation. His navigator calls out the target. Broadcasting house, dead ahead. 11:07 a.m. Göring's voice fills German homes. No enemy aircraft threatens our capital. Our fighters control. The first bomb hits. A 500-pounder slams into broadcasting house, 200 meters from where Göring is speaking. The building shudders. The microphone cuts out mid-sentence. For 3 seconds, there is only static across German radio. Then the air raid sirens start. Chaos erupts in the air ministry. Göring's aides rush him away from the windows as 2 more explosions rock central Berlin. Outside, crowds scatter. Flak guns thunder. Somewhere above the clouds, the FW-190s are still climbing, still searching. The Mosquitoes are already gone. By 11:15, they're over the Baltic, heading home. Not a single bullet hole between them. Behind them, Berlin burns. Not from massive damage, but from massive humiliation. The Reich Marshal, who promised the German people that no bombs would fall on Berlin, has just been interrupted mid-boast by the very enemy he swore couldn't reach them. And they did it in daylight. In wooden aircraft, the raids continue. 3 more times that week, Mosquitoes hit Berlin in broad daylight. Each time, German fighters scramble. Each time, they arrive too late. Göring's fury is absolute. He demands answers. He demands better fighters. He demands the impossible, that his Air Force catch an aircraft his engineers told him couldn't exist. In a private meeting weeks later, his rage gives way to something worse: admission. "I turn green and yellow with envy," he tells his staff, staring at reconnaissance photos of the Mosquito. "The British, who can afford aluminum better than we can, knocked together a beautiful wooden aircraft that every piano factory over there is building. They make a fighter bomber that flies rings around our machines." The man who embodied Nazi air supremacy had just confessed the truth. A wooden ghost had beaten us, the Luftwaffe. And the entire Reich heard it happen. After Berlin, the Mosquito didn't just become operational. It became everywhere. Bomber Command deployed it for precision strikes. Coastal Command used it to hunt U-boats. Photo reconnaissance units flew it deep into occupied Europe, mapping defenses the Germans thought were hidden. Pathfinder squadrons used it to mark targets for heavy bomber raids, flying ahead of the main force alone, unarmed except for speed. The wooden ghost had become a legend with 1,000 faces. Flight Lieutenant Tony Carlisle flies solo reconnaissance missions over Peenemünde, photographing V-2 rocket sites from 30,000 feet. Alone. No wingman. No support. Just 1,200 miles of hostile airspace, out and back, dodging radar stations, weaving between fighter patrol zones, relying on speed and altitude to survive. He completes 17 missions without ever firing a shot. Because the Mosquito doesn't need to fight. It simply goes where other aircraft can't. Wing Commander Reggie Reynolds leads low-level precision raids on Gestapo headquarters across occupied France. His Mosquito skims treetops at 300 feet, navigating by landmarks, a church steeple, a river bend, a rail line. German flak gunners don't even have time to track him before he's passed. He drops his bombs through the windows of SS buildings in broad daylight. Surgical. Devastating. gone before the smoke clears. French resistance fighters call him Le Fantôme, the Phantom. Squadron leader John Wooldridge flies Pathfinder missions over Hamburg, Bremen, the Ruhr. His Mosquito reaches the target 10 minutes before the main bombers stream, marking it with flares while German night fighters search uselessly in the dark. By the time they locate him, he's 50 miles away, invisible again. In Luftwaffe ready rooms from Norway to France, the stories accumulate like wounds. Pilots return from failed intercepts, shaking their heads. We had altitude. We had position. It just left us. Radar operators report contacts that vanish before fighters arrive. By the time we vector our planes, the enemy is outbound. We're always 10 minutes too late. Flak crews fire at silhouettes they can barely see. It's too high, too fast. We're shooting at shadows. The Mosquito isn't just beating German defenses, it's making them irrelevant. And the psychological toll cuts deeper than any bomb. Because the Luftwaffe's entire purpose, the reason it exists, is to protect German airspace. To deny the enemy the skies over the fatherland. But now, a wooden aircraft flies wherever it wants, photographs whatever it needs, bombs whatever it chooses, in broad daylight, alone, untouched. A Luftwaffe intelligence report from March 1943 captures the growing dread. If the enemy can reach Berlin in daylight with impunity, if our radar and fighters cannot intercept, if even our capital is vulnerable, then where is safe? What can we defend? The answer settles over German air crews like a cold fog. Nowhere. Nothing. By mid-1943, the Mosquito has flown over 2,000 combat missions. Loss rate, 0.63%. The wooden wonder isn't just a success. It's a ghost the Luftwaffe can't exorcise. A myth they can't counter. A reminder that their ideology of steel and supremacy has been outflown by plywood and imagination. And the war is only halfway over. By 1944, the Luftwaffe was fighting a war on 4 fronts. In the east, Soviet aircraft swarm German positions. In the Mediterranean, Allied air power dominates Italy. Over the Channel, American B-17s hammer Germany by day, while RAF Lancasters strike by night. And everywhere, from Norway to France, from the North Sea to Berlin, mosquitoes hunt. The wooden ghost has become an infestation. But the Mosquito's most devastating role isn't dropping bombs on cities. It's destroying the system that defends them. March 1944. RAF Mosquitoes begin targeting German radar installations along the Atlantic Wall. Low-level precision strikes. 2 aircraft, 4 bombs, 1 radar station erased. The raids are surgical, methodical, relentless. Würzburg radar arrays in Normandy, destroyed. Freya early warning stations in Holland, obliterated. Mammoth long-range radar near Calais, shattered. German technicians repair 1 station while Mosquitoes destroy 2 more. The air defense network that once blanketed occupied Europe begins to go dark. Blind spots emerge. Coverage gaps widen. Allied bombers exploit them immediately. April 1944. Mosquitoes hit German communications hubs, telephone exchanges, radio relay stations, command centers. The Gestapo headquarters in The Hague, leveled. Luftwaffe Operations Center in Eggebek, crippled. SS intelligence facility in Aarhus, demolished. Each raid is precise. Each target was carefully chosen not for spectacle, but for effect. Without radar, German fighters can't be vectored to threats. Without communications, regional commands can't coordinate defenses. Without coordination, the Luftwaffe's carefully planned air defense doctrine collapses into chaos. Fighters scramble to the wrong locations. Reinforcements arrive too late. Orders never reach their units. The machine is breaking down. June 6, 1944. D-Day. When Allied forces hit Normandy beaches, the Luftwaffe flies fewer than 300 sorties. The Allies fly over 14,000. Göring's mighty Air Force, the steel fist of the Reich, is nowhere. Not because German pilots lack courage, not because German aircraft lack capability, but because the system that enables them has been dismantled, piece by piece, radar station by radar station, communications hub by communications hub. And the Mosquito led that dismantling. By late 1944, German oil refineries were ablaze. Synthetic fuel plants in Leuna, Pölitz, and Merseburg, Leuna burn under repeated Allied raids, many marked by Mosquito pathfinders. Luftwaffe fighters sit grounded, not from losses, from lack of fuel. Jet aircraft, the Me-262s that could finally catch the Mosquito, arrived too late, in too few numbers, flown by pilots with too little training and too little fuel to matter. In ready rooms across Germany, Luftwaffe crews stare at empty assignment boards. No fuel for training flights, no spare parts for repairs, no radar coverage to guide intercepts. The pride that once filled those rooms, the certainty that German engineering and German will would prevail, has been replaced by exhausted resignation. One pilot's diary entry, February 1945. We built an air force on the belief that we were superior, that our technology, our tactics, our very spirit made us invincible. Then a wooden plane flew over Berlin, and we've been losing ever since. Perhaps we were never as superior as we believed. The Luftwaffe didn't fall in a single battle. It was hollowed out, blinded, starved, outthought. And when the end came, it came not with thunder, but with silence. The silence of grounded aircraft, the silence of darkened radar screens, the silence of an ideology that believed supremacy was birthright, meeting the reality that wars are won by those who adapt, not those who boast. When the war ended in May 1945, the de Havilland Mosquito had flown 39,795 operational sorties. It had delivered over 26 million pounds of bombs, photographed every major target in occupied Europe, led Pathfinder missions for 1,000-bomber raids, hunted submarines, destroyed V-1 rockets in flight, precision-bombed Gestapo prisons to free resistance fighters. And it did all of this with a loss rate of 0.63%, the lowest of any Allied bomber in the war. But numbers don't tell the whole story. After the war, aviation historians and military analysts began reassessing the Mosquito, not as a curiosity or a desperate gamble, but as one of the most significant aircraft designs of the 20th century. The Royal Aeronautical Society declared it the most versatile aircraft of World War II. Engineers who once mocked wooden construction studied its laminated plywood frame with new respect. The bonding techniques, the aerodynamic efficiency, the structural integrity that matched, and in some cases exceeded, metal airframes. What had seemed like desperation was now recognized as innovation. What looked like a compromise was actually a breakthrough. The Mosquito proved that the future of warfare wasn't owned by those with the most resources, but by those willing to rethink the rules entirely. In 1947, Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Harris, head of RAF Bomber Command, wrote, "The Mosquito was one of the war's great success stories. It could do everything, and it did everything superbly. We asked it to be a bomber, a fighter, a reconnaissance aircraft, a pathfinder. It excelled at all of them." Göring's wooden toy had become Britain's masterpiece, but perhaps the most powerful legacy isn't found in official histories. It's found in the words of the men who flew it. Squadron leader Bob Iredale, Mosquito pilot, 1944–45. "We flew faster because we believed we could. The aircraft didn't just perform, it made you believe in what you were doing. You felt untouchable, not out of arrogance, but because the plane gave you confidence. It never let us down." Flight Lieutenant Maurice Briggs, Photo reconnaissance pilot. I flew alone over Germany 52 times. 52 times I came home. The Mosquito wasn't just an aircraft, it was a promise. Get in, do the job, get out. It kept that promise every time. Wing Commander John de Lacy Wooldridge. Pathfinder pilot. We flew ahead of the bomber streams knowing we had no armor, no defensive guns, just speed and altitude. And it was enough. More than enough. The Mosquito didn't ask you to be brave. It made bravery possible. Today, only 3 de Havilland Mosquitoes remain in flying condition worldwide. But their legacy echoes far beyond museums. Every stealth bomber is designed for speed over armor. Every reconnaissance drone built for agility over firepower. Every military innovation that chooses elegant solutions over brute force carries the ghost of the Mosquito in its DNA. Because the wooden wonder proved something the Nazis never understood, wars aren't won by those who build the heaviest machines. They're won by those who build the smartest ones. And sometimes, the smartest machine is the one nobody expected. In the end, 2 nations built aircraft according to what they believed. Germany's arrogance built monuments of metal, heavy, armored, bristling with guns. They built machines that embodied their ideology. Dominance through force, supremacy through industrial might, victory through the sheer weight of steel. Britain's desperation built a miracle of wood, not because they wanted to, because they had to, because aluminum was scarce and the Luftwaffe was at their doorstep, and there was no time for convention, no luxury of following established doctrine. So they built something the enemy said was impossible. And in doing so, they built something extraordinary. In the skies above Berlin, the truth was clear. Innovation, not ideology, wins wars. Adaptability, not arrogance, determines survival. And sometimes the greatest weapon isn't the one that announces itself with thunder, but the one that arrives like a ghost and leaves before you know it was there. The Mosquito wasn't just an aircraft. It was proof of a principle that echoes far beyond World War II, that constraints can breed genius, that unconventional thinking can defeat conventional power, that the future belongs not to those who cling to what worked before, but to those willing to imagine what might work next. Nazi Germany believed their supremacy was inevitable, that their engineering doctrine was unquestionable, that steel and firepower and industrial might made them unstoppable. They built their entire war machine on that certainty, and a wooden plane shattered it. Geoffrey de Havilland and his team didn't set out to make history. They set out to solve a problem. How to build a bomber when you don't have the materials everyone says you need. The answer wasn't in building more of what already existed. It was in building something entirely different. That's the lesson the Mosquito teaches us, 80 years later. Not just about aircraft design, not just about military strategy, but about how we face impossible challenges. When resources are limited, creativity expands. When convention fails, innovation begins. When arrogance says, "This is how it must be done," humility asks, "What if there's another way?" The last Mosquito combat mission was flown in December 1955, but the spirit of that wooden wonder, the audacity to challenge assumptions, the courage to trust in an untested idea, the belief that speed and intelligence can outmatch brute force, lives on. In every engineer who questions the old way, in every leader who empowers unconventional thinking, in every person who looks at an impossible problem and refuses to accept that it can't be solved. The final footage is grainy, black and white, beautiful. Mosquito pilots returning to base after a mission over Germany, climbing out of their cockpits, tired, exhilarated, alive. They're smiling, not the smiles of conquerors, but of craftsmen who trusted their tools and lived to tell about it. They flew a wooden plane into the heart of the Reich and came home. They proved that genius doesn't require resources. It requires vision. Germany built monuments. Britain built a ghost. And the ghost won.